So welcome to the 2020 meeting of the Energy Charter Independent Accountability Panel, and thank you for the disclosure from Endeavour Energy. In starting the meeting, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I think you probably, Guy, I don't know whether you've met the panel, but anyway, here we are. Claire Petrie, I'm the chair and was the former Energy and Water Ombudsman in New South Wales. Cassandra Goldie, the CEO of ACOS, and Andrew Richards, the CEO of the EUAA. I'm going to pass to you in a moment to make any introductory comments, highlight any things from your disclosure statement that you'd like to draw our attention to. But in doing so, the panel wants to say to you what we've said to all the CEOs, and that we acknowledge that this has been an unprecedented year for all the businesses in terms of fire, floods and the COVID pandemic. And we know that that has had an impact on everyone, and you'll probably want to mention that. So that said, I will pass to you, and if you want to make some opening comments, then we'll open it up for discussion and questions.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, probably just then, just a brief one for me. Probably as someone who's come into the organisation somewhere through those storms and floods and COVID. So, you know, I suppose mine's a bit of reflection because I'm sort of 6 months into the role now. And obviously you've done your research before sort of joining Endeavour. So I suppose for me, it's just sort of pleasing that you can see we're on a journey, like anything. And I suppose my background coming from water and Ofwat in the UK, sort of trying to translate that to sort of the journey that we were on there in the sort of the early 2000s. So yeah, look, I think, look, we've made good headway, but I still feel we've got a fair way to go from a customer perspective. You know, I think it's pleasing that people have started to put customer first, and they haven't just started to do it just because the regulator has sort of demanded it in some respects. I think they've sort of realised that you get a better outcome with putting the customer first and actually doing that engagement front and foremost. And you can sort of see how that's sort of playing out. And we've sort of done that in terms of some of the, you know, the visual things that we can do. So we've certainly put customer at the front in terms of our purpose. It sort of sits right in the middle of our values. And I think also sort of play that one out. You know, we have created a role that's now got sort of customer as the sort of the lead title that sits with strategy. And that was just an important one for me, sort of looking at the business in terms of where customers sat. Customer and community and stakeholder was really important to me, and it needed to sit around our strategy because you weren't going to get anywhere near a successful strategy if you didn't really engage with the customer, the community and the stakeholder. So getting people to sort of realise that was the sort of the first bit, not the strategy bit, was important. So yeah, so I think it's like anything in life, it's a journey, but we're certainly improving to where we were. And I think, yeah, as you say, I think it was a challenging year in terms of sort of what was thrown at people, and we were no different to many organisations, but maybe you need challenging years to sort of remember who you're here for in the first place.
I just coming in as a newly to Endeavour Energy, we'd be interested in your view of the Energy Charter and your view of where you were this time last year and where you are now, or where you think you should be, and the whole exercise of being a member of a signatory to the Charter.
Yeah, look, I mean, I did, you know, from my perspective, coming from WA, you saw what was happening from an industry perspective. You could see the benefit of getting a more sort of consolidated view. You can see the benefit of learning from each other by sort of, you know, doing that meeting and that consultation together. I think has definitely helped in terms of the outcome. I think it's been very well led. You know, you need that sort of drive from people to get things moving, and I think that's helped us as a business. I hope I think that's helped us as an industry. And so I think you can see some of the benefits that have come out, as we sort of go into sort of year 2 for this now. It's good in some respects to be held accountable for things that you'll be buying into and actually sort of delivering. And so I think that foundational piece was probably what was happening in that first year. And I suppose this second year is then how you take that forward, own it, make sure that the outcomes you get is good for the customer going forward.
One of the themes, obviously, that's been emerging from all our discussions, not surprisingly, is the impact of the whole economic situation on customers. So I'm going to pass to Cassandra to talk about vulnerability of customers and the whole financial situation.
Yep.
See you again, Guy.
How you doing? You all right?
What a few months, hey?
It is, yeah. I've still not made it back to Perth yet, so.
Yeah, me neither. There we go. So that's it, hey? Look, can I pick up on a couple of things specifically straight into the vulnerable area, so Principle 5, because we're very aware, significantly different environment for, on affordability. And that a lot of vulnerability is likely to emerge. And there's a couple of things where you've talked about work that's underway, and I wanted to just get a bit of a sense of how concrete and substantial it is. So one was that you were looking to implement new systems to better monitor and measure financial hardship. Could you flesh that out a bit, be some more specific about what that actually is, what that work is, and whether you are doing any predictive work about what is coming, particularly once these income support arrangements fall away for people?
Yeah. I suppose just from I would say from a technology enablement point of view, I think Endeavour, I don't think, has probably invested heavily in the last few years, but has really ramped it up, I would say, in the last 18 months. So I think that's the bit that you're starting to sort of get to fruition. So we're obviously now having put the main building blocks in of sort of a new ERP system. That also then comes out that sort of customer relationship piece as well for us. So, and sitting on top of that is obviously the reporting side of it, and it's not reporting from a lagging perspective. It's really trying to say what can we now understand from a customer perspective, from a leading perspective. And I think, look, our learnings, COVID was a really good learning for us, because I think, when COVID hit the industry, end of March, beginning of April, the only people that really had the data to understand the initial impact was probably Victoria from an advanced metering perspective. So somehow I think we've got to get to that space, and I think then we'll have the support sort of IT sitting behind it that can actually use it appropriately to provide good insight in terms of where we need to get to. So I think that's very much sort of sitting within our IT strategy over the next sort of year and a half, that we know where we've got to get to. And in some respects, I think COVID's maybe pushed us a bit harder on that. It's that old case that I think the customer's part of the IT enablements, generally the sort of forgotten piece at the end. Whereas I think at last it's coming more to the front in terms of what you need to do to understand where you can help people going forward.
Yeah.
I might just add to that, if you don't mind. We did ask Deloitte Access Economics to do some modelling for us. So this would have been around about sort of April, thereabouts, April, May. And they did look out sort of forward-looking sort of 18 months to 2 years. And they did sort of reflect what would happen, once various sort of federal support programs would roll off, and particularly focused on the demographic in our supply area. Yeah. And we did actually provide a summary of that sort of to the AER as part of our sort of our sort of pricing proposal. So that's some additional work that we did on top of that. And
that's great to know, actually, Rod. because it's variable in terms of what people are reporting and what people have got in place to manage the next 18 months, you know. The technology solutions, is that something that you've got a plan to implement but has not yet started? Like, Guy, you talked 18 months for getting this better sort of predictive technology in place, and I'm assuming that relates to segmenting of your customer base.
So that's comes to the end of the whole program. So we started this journey 18 months ago. So we're in the middle. We ended up with 4 releases across an IT sort of a strategy and an enablement platform across the whole business. So we're actually have done phases 1 and 2. We're into 3, and then obviously 4 is a lot of the customer ones that sort of rounds it all off. So yeah, 18 months is like to finish it, to finish the whole program. But we're starting to see the benefits as obviously you've started to do the various releases over the last 18 months.
That sounds like this is quite a substantial investment that you've made. And given that, did you do any work on vulnerability indicators? Just in terms of what is actually the analytics you're putting in place?
I think I'll hand to Rod from sort of the detail, because obviously this was done quite a bit of time ago. But in terms of obviously like scoping what we needed from a customer point of view, we looking external, you know, looking in terms of you know the types of insights that you require. I think all of that came out, all that segmentation came out, and that's all obviously forming part of the build of what we need going forward in that CRM module.
And just sort of to pick that up, and a lot comes back to, I suppose, the definition of vulnerable customers, and I suppose we look at it in a number of different slices. You know, we've got sort of life support customers, about 31,000 life support customers. So that's sort of one slice of, and various programs associated with that. We have a slice around hardship programs, particularly around what we can do to work with customers who have to fix sort of private defects on their part of the network, and again have programs around that. Even like the bushfires that occurred sort of late last year, early this year, you know, by definition, there are a number of sort of vulnerable sort of customers associated with that in regard to, you know, outages, reconnection fees. Sensitive loads during a normal sort of outage situation, we again segment our customers in terms of their vulnerability, be it hospitals, nursing homes, water pumping stations, CALD customers as well. So when you talk about sort of metrics, I think it sort of comes back to, you know, what's the segment of vulnerable customers you're talking about, and really what's your focus area. So I don't know whether that helps or
designing your framework for that, because you're quite correct, of course, there are different types of vulnerability. It's an easy word to use, but you've actually got to think about the human experience, what's going on.
Yes.
Did you design your own sort of an analysis of the different categories and how you would interrogate that, or did you draw on something from somewhere else?
I think it's a bit of a mixture of both. I think we sort of looked at our own experiences in our supply area, what the challenges we've got, the problems and issues we encounter, and I think that's really where most of the thinking has come from. But obviously, you know, you learn from others at the same time.
And look, we're just testing out the scope for the charter to be a framework for developing some consistency in the understanding of who's vulnerable and, you know, across the industry, because that would be really useful.
Yes.
Okay. So
and we do see the charter has actually been a great tool to enable sort of benchmarking and learning across all elements of the supply chain. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. Can I just
sorry, just because I'm just sort of just picking up that from Rod, because again, I think we got some great learnings in the last sort of 6 months, and so the speed of what happens in the last 6 months sort of, you know, means we can move quickly as well in terms of what it's showing you. And I think from the vulnerability one's interesting because you can go to sort of the vulnerability in terms of the ability to pay the bill. But what we certainly saw through COVID was that vulnerability of supply was really important to the customer. So that the fact that they were homeschooling, the fact that they were at home all day, working out how we were actually going to have to adapt the way we did maintenance was really important to actually make sure that they had a really good service during that period. So in some respects, we didn't even get to the vulnerability of ability to pay, in some of the cases, because what was really important was to make sure the experience was good when they were working from home and that they were homeschooling and that we weren't the sort of the blocker to the loss of the internet and things like that. So we certainly had to adapt the work practice quite heavily during that period, being conscious of that type of vulnerability.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy. And just coming back to principle 1, just keen to know to what extent you've got skills in the governance structures about social policy, equity, financial distress, that sort of, if you put your customer at the heart of the business and then you focus on the most needy customers, do you have that expertise plugged in at the governance executive level?
I think it's got a lot better, and I'll go board as well. I'll go higher. So we've been very conscious, I think, in some of the optics of the word. So we sort of said customer and community. So we sort of tried to make sure people realise that you are the community, you're embedded in the community. All of our employees work in our community, so that they are the customer. And so trying to get that buy-in has probably helped us in some respects. So pretty much now, there's not many conversations that happen from an exec point of view that doesn't have the customer in the middle that sort of starts the conversation, and if it doesn't, it triggers a conversation. And look, I think we even know going forward we're not going to be successful without it. So we know the customer's got choice, and if we want to be the supplier that they choose to do that in the future, we've got to be good at it. We've got to raise our game to get there.
Thanks, Guy. Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks. Before I pass to Andrew, I just wanted to ask, the retailers obviously are talking to their customers all the time on the phone, but you have a whole group of people out in the field who have a direct line of sight to customers, knocking on doors of people on life support or looking at, doing inspections, etc. Do you capture that? That's a wonderful source of intelligence about what's happening out in your communities. Do you have a way of capturing that and feeding that into the customer experience and problems so that you might be able to anticipate and deal with issues ahead of time?
Yes, we do. But that probably surrounds that IT enablement that we're doing. I think we're probably not different to a lot of utilities that, if you look at the amount of applications our call center has to deal with, we've got to make that better, and we've got to make that better for the people in the call center, because that makes it fundamentally better for the customer, and that's what's sort of driving that capturing of even free text that you can actually use going forward in an insightful way as form part of what we want to do in the future. You probably got me on my hobby horse, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds on it. Look, I had the same issue in the water industry in the UK. I had the same issue in Western Power, and it's really interesting that sometimes as a distributor you think you've got 40 customers because you've got 40 retailers, but what you've actually got, you've got 1.1 million contacts. And 1.1 million contacts, I can assure you, is 1.1 million customers. And so even though they don't pay my bill, which is some people's definition of a customer, they are my customer. And you're right, because we've got most of the contact. We are the visible face for that customer, and if they're in some sort of vulnerable situation, or they need their power, it's us they come to. So again, that was another reason that we know it's got to be at the centre of everything that we do.
In fact, they do pay your bill, though. Your bill is quite a substantial part of their bill, is it not?
Yeah, I'm just, but you know, it's just one of the sort of the blocks in the chain that people sort of hide behind, and I'm probably, you know, I'm saying it's the other way. You can't hide behind that. We are the sort of that front of the customer. So you know that's something you've therefore got to like respect what that is and make sure you do it well.
Okay, I'll pass to Andrew.
That's Claire. G'day, Guy. Right. You're obviously in your disclosure, and today you're sort of describing how you're embedding the charter principles inside your business. But your business has obviously a lot of third parties that you interact with, you know, subcontractors and metering agents and all those sorts of things. How are you going about it? Do you intend to seek to embed charter principles in those third parties? And if so, how are you going about doing that?
Yeah, so I think we do, and we have to, and it probably goes back to that principle that you know the customer generally doesn't see the contractor; they generally will see Endeavour. So you know, as soon as we make that commitment when we're contracting with a subcontractor, then they become part of Endeavour. So yeah, the same principles sort of come on when we actually get a new subcontractor on board. That we go through in terms of what we expect from a customer perspective. So I think again we've got very much better on that. We've actually got just probably a bit of my insight. We've certainly probably got a lower mix of outsourced work. So I think from a pure maintenance perspective, Endeavour's got a very high proportion that's done in-house, which does make it sort of easier from that perspective. But we still got probably a tier one vegetation contractor that again we've got to make sure that they're on board, and we do that by sort of regular meetings. We do that when we do the initial contract. We do that with a regular catch up with them as we're going through that. And now probably our other big one here is probably on the meter side with UGL. So they're probably the two key ones that we've got. We also really emphasise that it's not only who we contract to, but quite often that contractor obviously subcontracts it out again and again, making sure that you retain sort of ownership of that whole supply chain is really important to us, because it is our reputation that's on the line as well, and so they've got to be our voice as consistently as we are.
So is that a systematic approach? And I know you would take quite a rigorous approach to health and safety. So you would sit down and have toolbox sessions with people and all those sorts of things. Do you envisage the same thing happening around toolbox sessions for customer?
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and again, I think the insights that you're getting from the contact sort of feed some of that as well. So I think some of the feedback that we get coming into the call centre is again, it's generic, whether it's an Endeavour, employee direct labour, or whether it's a contractor. So we have to make sort of the same sort of rigour around the way we do safety as the same we do with customer. Quite often, funny enough, the two actually interrelate quite well as well. That quite often what a customer's experiences could also be a safety issue as well. So you can actually quite well combine the two.
Okay. Something completely different then, but the top of everyone's mind moving forward, net zero emissions by 2050 obviously creates risks, but also opportunities for both you and for your customers. And one of those risks, potential for stranded asset, the potential for write down of asset, and how that may blow back onto consumer bills. There's obviously the opportunities that could come from greater collaboration. So just walk us through how your organisation is approaching net zero by 2050, and where you see those threats and opportunities, and how you manage the threats and take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, so I think there's probably two lines to it, because I think like net zero is probably not just us as a distributor, but it's how you're working with the industry as a whole. So you're obviously seeing sort of both ends of the energy chain. You're seeing a lot of front end in terms of obviously moving out of the fossil fuel generation to obviously renewables, and obviously that's important for us because at the end of the day it then connects to our grid, and we've got to make sure our grid is robust and strong enough to sort of take that change. So you're sort of working through that pretty well as an industry as a whole. we've probably got the effect at the other end, which is at the lower end distribution, but again from a renewables perspective, where you're seeing obviously a massive increase in solar PV on roofs, and you're seeing obviously at the start of what will be a pretty large increase in batteries. So again, it's probably making sure that our network in the middle is obviously sustainable for that in the future. So I think probably two of the big impacts are probably either end of our grid from that sort of zero emissions point of view. I think just as a good citizen in the middle, then we're probably doing everything we can just individually within that network. So taking up that new technology, which is certainly you know, a lot better from a sustainability point of view than what the traditional network is. So that's, you know, again, moving to more renewable sources. We're taking it up pretty strongly as well from the sites that we actually use. So yeah, it's probably you know, it's probably dovetailed in two areas. It's probably industry as a whole, and making sure that our network and how that change is impacting the network is a big one for us. And that's obviously really important from a customer perspective to make sure that network remains sort of very robust and reliable. And I suppose, yeah, then there's the secondary one, which is us as a network individually and what we can do. But yeah, it's got very big buy-in from you know, the shareholders in terms of MIRA and AMP, and certainly the government shareholder as well. So
within that, you see greater collaboration with consumers.
Yeah, I think you're seeing it, and you're seeing the collaboration because of the technology change, and so the technology change is with a lot of it is with the customer. So again, it's probably in a good way forced the collaboration. You know, you can see the technology change at one end of the distribution network in terms of solar and now batteries, and so that's probably been a good plus in terms of how you then collaborate in terms of how that makes our network, you know, much more sustainable for the future.
Okay. I might just add, you know, we set ourselves a task over the last 12 months to develop some science-based targets, and those targets are really focused on sort of trying to reduce our sort of emissions by about 40% by 2035. And so they're both scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And examples of that, of course, is that, you know, we have rolled out a fairly comprehensive, not yet complete, but a fairly comprehensive program of solar panels on our depots and our buildings. We've been working very closely with councils on sort of swapping out public lighting into LED lighting. We're looking at some various initiatives around how do we actually look at line losses, because line losses is a fairly significant part of emissions. So they're just various initiatives where we're working through, but the aim, of course, was to come back to a science-based approach.
Okay, thank you.
That from you, Andrew, thanks. Look, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One was you made a comment in your disclosure about needing to make customer communication more accessible. Could you talk about that a little more in terms of what's the current problem, what are you aiming for, and where do you hope to get to?
I think so. Ours was probably very traditional, Claire, from that perspective, and I think just really, you know, moving a bit quicker and taking advantage of the different communication channels that are available, I think, is what we really pushed. So, you know, we've certainly obviously had a much bigger push on some of the social media channels in the last sort of 4 months, which you can see the benefit in terms of the 2 storms that we've had. You know, that's much more accessible, and it's a much better means that the consumer and the customer actually is looking for. So trying to use the available channels that are out there is something that we're really trying to push. We've got another program that, again, we've sort of started now to actually make our website much more user friendly. You know, and so again, coming out of that is some of the apps that can make it much more, you know, approachable and easy to use. So trying to just take advantage of the technologies out there, but just making sure that everybody's got the right type of channel that they want to use is probably where we're trying to get to. I think we've been pretty traditional, when there's lots more available channels that would be much more helpful. And then we probably resource some of those social media ones so that we can respond quicker as well in terms of what questions are being asked to us, but also so we can update it regularly in times when we need to.
Okay. Could I also ask you your involvement in the Better Together initiatives of the Charter? Are you an active and positive participant? And do you see that, what sort of value do you see in that, in those initiatives and your collaboration with others in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I've probably again I've come in late, but certainly from what I've seen, we've certainly been active on the, you know, I've certainly at the high level I've been on those sort of sessions where they've been sort of updating and consolidating, but then certainly sort of as we've gone down into it, we've certainly put people forward in the sort of, you know, various sort of groups that they've then played off of to make sure these things aren't just on a bit of paper, but they actually happen. So I think, yeah, we've certainly had our input, and we've certainly bought into sort of the initiatives that have come out of it. So, yeah, certainly one that will be ongoing and keeping very close to. But yeah, as I say, I think I said, you know, right at the start, I think the fact that you can learn from each other is a real plus. You know, the fact that you are talking about what's working and what's not working, I think has really helped in the last year.
And I'd also add, sort of, we've been using Kate McHugh as our sort of main sort of conduit to enable those initiatives of working together, and she's been sort of coming back and engaging with various people in the organisation where we believe that there's actually some real value to be gained.
Right.
Can I just pick it up there, Claire, if it's all right? On the is that okay, Claire? Just
Yeah, of course, go.
Thanks. Just over the next period, of course, we do think that the issues of vulnerability for end users is going to be pretty acute. And within the Charter framework, we do think that this collaboration across the industry is going to be pretty key. There is the bit about learning from each other, but there's also the hard edge of accountability, you know, for actual changes and for having ensuring we're not passing the buck, you know, in terms of who needs to do what to deliver better affordability in particular, I think. So could you speak to your views? And it'll be interesting, you know, Rod and Guy with different lenses and timeframes of being involved, right? You know, because I'm sure many things have been tried before, yeah? What do you see as being where you would want us to help, say, to signatories, if nothing else, work on these things to deliver a better outcome? What do you really think? I'm particularly interested in the vulnerability side, and we all are, because otherwise we can have a fair bit of light touch activity under the name of the Charter, and not much will necessarily change.
Did you want to start, Rod, or do you want me to go?
Well, I might start, and it might be a little bit provocative, but you know, I read in preparation for this document that was produced by the Energy Users Consulting Group, I think it's called, and it was quite sort of brutal in its language. And I suppose reflecting on, and I've been in this industry since I left school, so I've seen it all come and go many, many times. And I sort of sat back after reading that and thinking, well, it's not clear to me what, you know, energy sort of consumers want from the industry. You know, it's a little bit of motherhood. That might be a bit unfair, but I think it'd be great to actually have, you know, what are the 1, 2 or 3 things that really will be important to take this forward, because it's not clear based on the document I read.
Thanks, Rod. Guy, do you want to add to that?
But I suppose, look, I mean, I probably just staying with your vulnerability perspective, Cassandra. I think for me, look, you know, what's our learnings for the last 6 months? I think we've got to probably make it easier for the customer, and we even picked up in this conversation that, you know, a distributor's part of the bill, but not all of it. And I think somehow we've got to realise that at the end of the day, that the customer, if it's vulnerable, you know, is going to struggle to pay that bill. So I think we have got to come up with ways that we collaborate as a whole industry to realise that at the end of the day, it's the one customer who can't pay. And I think we do get stuck in the middle of, you know, the sort of chain of, you know, the retailer to the distributor to the generator. And you know, that is the customer bill sort of thing. So I think if I reflect on COVID, you know, I think from a sector we probably got away, certainly I'd say lighter than some other industries in terms of what's gone on in COVID. But I think we've got to prepare ourselves that the customer will be in a very vulnerable situation in a few months' time when some of the other things play off, such as JobKeeper and Job Seeker, and, you know, some of the sort of mortgage sort of deferments that banks are going to do. So I suppose I'm going to put my social community hat on and say, like, what are we going to do then? And I think that's the bit that we've got to work through.
Yeah, because I think the question being posed is, with your deep expertise from the inside and knowing the different actors that in the end lead to whether a bill is affordable or not, the problem is that everybody can point somewhere else and say, well, you've got to fix that bit. And the discipline this time around is to go, actually, we're going to start with what we're doing to fix our bit, and then collaborate across the other parts to, you know, to knit it together. And so just wanted to get, you know, your views from the inside about where you would like to spend your time collaborating over the next 12 months to deliver on that.
So I think, you know, I think if I look at what happened, you know, during COVID, and I look at the, you know, what went through the ENA from one perspective, then what went through from a sort of rule change AER perspective, and I think what was discussed and what got put in place, I think was good. I think that was a good start. But if you then look, it probably hadn't had a big take up, but that doesn't mean it wasn't bad. But one of the issues is it probably hasn't impacted the industry yet. So I think what you've got to look at is, if it does, you know, if the hardship plays out in 6 to 12 months and the impact is in the industry from the vulnerability of a customer, is that the solution that's going to work? Because I think that's the lesson that I'd probably say that I think we need to look at. Because I think what it seemed to work, as in it was it was a good piece of collaboration. You know, it sort of you know, it aided, you know, during a period of immense uncertainty, but it also aided in a period where I don't think the big debt impact happened. I think we've got to work out whether it would work when it could happen.
It's a good point, because you had, it really acted as a safety net underneath the government assistance.
Yep.
So once you take the government assistance away, all you have is the safety net. But as you say, is the safety net sufficient? And do we need to do more going forward? Because just looking at even C&I customers and SME, we're feeling as though the true impacts aren't this year, but next year.
Yeah.
And I think that theme's coming through really clear, Claire and Cass, that next year is probably going to be a more impactful year than we've seen as these other things roll off. So Rod, can I just pick up that report that you referred to? Was that from the End User Consultative Group?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yes.
Oh, okay. Good.
Just to take up your point a little bit more, it's been in terms of pointing fingers. There's a retailer proposition that they carry all the risk, and you don't, essentially. And I wonder what your view is of that, and whether you think the networks really need to step up a bit more in terms of direct assistance to customers in in difficulties?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain. Look, I'm not going to sit on that sort of retailer fence from that. Are you still there?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've lost you on screen. That's all. Look, again, I can sort of play devil's advocate with the retailer.
Oh, now we've lost you, Guy. Now you're back, and you're on mute. We can see you, Guy. We just can't hear you.
I might just walk into the office next door and remind him.
Rod's coming your way, Guy, if you can hear me.
The technology hasn't been too bad. There's a few little glitches, but
Yeah.
it's to be expected.
No, I think it's worked out quite well, actually. I think Guy is relocating.
You'll probably need to use my.
I'm going to go change the scenery.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you. We can hear you and see you.
Brilliant. With headphones. Look, I think I sort of play devil's advocate a bit in terms of the retailer. So, yeah, look, I think they've got risk, but I think we've all got risk in a different way. Yes, they've got debt risk right at the end, but then they also possibly haven't got the investment risk of putting the network in the first place. So it sort of all plays out in different ways. But I suppose we've all got to take a bit of a step back off that one, and it's really, I suppose, if I look at what it's interesting, what we was sort of trying to protect, or from a vulnerability point of view, was the competition of the smaller retailers, and the retailer at the other end was trying to protect the vulnerability of the actual end customer who was paying the bill. But it all sort of flowed through the chain. Look, I think we have risk. I think it's just a different type of risk. It's not the debt risk, but we probably got the high investment risk of the network in the first place. So, a retailer's probably got a very low, capital, a capital model, with a customer debt. We probably got a very high capital investment risk. But the sort of the nominal customer is that retailer. So it just sort of shifts it in a different way. But the end of it is a customer can't afford to pay a bill, and that's the bit that we've got to, that we've got to work through. So I think that was why what was put in place for COVID was probably, in my view, quite a pragmatic solution. It was trying to sort of work out the pragmatism of where some of the risks sat. But I think, my challenge is, will that work effectively when something, when there is a much higher risk from a customer, inability to pay.
And the point's been rightly made to us, of course, that from the customer's point of view, all this behind the scenes should be invisible.
Yes, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
They should have one door for assistance, and that's it.
Yes.
And all this discussion can go on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Guy, we've run out of time. So unless Cass or Andrew have any questions, or you have anything else that you need to tell us about, I'm going to say...
Only Claire, if Guy has some advice on the one or two priorities that he thinks that we should be focusing on, or what his expectations of what he would like to see from our report. What are the top of mind things that would keep you awake at night that we can help you with in this report?
Yeah, I suppose, look, I mean, I think, for me, it's just sort of helping the industry on that journey, that, that putting the customer at the centre of your sort of business is the important part of it. And it does get a good outcome if you do it. So trying to get that sort of consistency across the industry, I think, if you can get some consistency across, you know, the sort of distributor to the gentailer as well. I think that will be helpful for the customer at the end of the day as well. So somehow if we can help with that collaboration, so it's not always the collaboration with just the sort of distributors, because I think that's probably at a higher level. It's probably the real plus of getting this, you know, the real plus of this energy charter is trying to get collaboration across the whole industry so that the customer can see just one face.
All right. Well, look, thank you very much. That's been very helpful. Thanks, Guy and Rod.
Thank you.
And Peter there in the background. We will talk to you next after we've finalised our report.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.